Let yourself sink deeper into your pillow now, feeling the weight of the day dissolving with each gentle breath. The room around you grows quieter, softer, as if the world itself is preparing for rest. Outside your window, perhaps you can imagine the last traces of twilight fading into deep indigo, stars beginning their slow emergence across the velvet sky. There's something deeply calming about this transition from wakefulness to sleep, this gradual release of tension from your shoulders, your jaw, the small muscles around your eyes that you didn't even realize were holding on. Tonight, we're going to explore one of nature's most misunderstood and surprisingly peaceful creatures. Snakes have moved through this world for over 100 million years, gliding silently through forests and deserts, across river stones and through underground passages, carrying with them an ancient wisdom written in scales and sinew. As we journey through their story together, let your breath slow to match the unhurried rhythm of a snake basking in dappled sunlight. Let your thoughts drift like ripples across still water. There's no rush here, no destination to reach. Just the gentle unfolding of fascinating truths, the soothing cadence of exploration, and the deep, restorative rest that awaits you at the end of this winding path. The deep history of serpents. To understand snakes, we must travel back through time, far beyond the boundaries of human civilization, beyond even the age of mammals as we know them today. Picture, if you will, the Earth during the middle part of the early Cretaceous period, roughly 128 million years ago. The continents were arranged differently then, joined together in massive supercontinents that would one day drift apart to form the world map we recognize today. The climate was warmer, more humid, with vast forests of primitive conifers and newly emerging flowering plants beginning their slow conquest of the landscape. It was during this time, in this alien yet somehow familiar world, that the first true snakes began their remarkable journey. The fossil record, though fragmentary and precious, tells us a story of transformation that would make any science fiction writer envious. Snakes did not simply appear fully formed from some primordial void. Rather, they evolved from lizard ancestors, undergoing one of the most dramatic bodily transformations ever documented in vertebrate evolution. The earliest snake fossils discovered date back between 167 million and 140 million years ago, found in places as distant from one another as England, Portugal, and Colorado. These ancient serpents, species with names like Eophis underwoodi, Portugalophis lignites, and Diablophis gilmorii, were already recognizably snake-like in their elongated forms, yet some retained tiny vestiges of the limbs their ancestors once possessed. Imagine holding in your hand a creature that measured perhaps no more than a few inches long, its body stretched into that characteristic sinuous shape, yet bearing underneath its scales the ghostly remnants of legs, hip bones, and pelvic structures that evolution had not yet completely erased. These remnants tell a profound story about the evolutionary process. Through careful analysis of fossil specimens and modern snake anatomy, scientists have determined that the loss of limbs in snakes occurred through specific genetic changes affecting embryonic development. In the year 2016, researchers identified that limb loss was associated with mutations in a regulatory region of a gene called sonic hedgehog, which plays a critical role in limb development across all vertebrates, including humans. This gene, remarkably, is the same in snakes as it is in mice and in humans, a humbling reminder of our shared evolutionary heritage stretching back to common ancestors hundreds of millions of years ago. The deletion of just 17 specific DNA base pairs in this regulatory region was enough to redirect the entire course of snake evolution, demonstrating how relatively small genetic changes can have profound morphological consequences. What caused their ancestors to abandon legs in favor of a limbless existence? The answer, as with so many questions in evolutionary biology, is complex and still debated among scientists, but evidence suggests that the earliest snakes were burrowing animals that spent most of their time underground. Fossils like Najash rhyonegrina, discovered in Patagonia and dated to approximately 90 million years ago, show a two-legged burrowing animal with a sacrum and pelvic elements, fully terrestrial and adapted for life beneath the surface where visibility is minimal and space is constrained. Underground existence would have favored a streamlined body capable of pushing through soil and navigating narrow tunnels with maximum efficiency. Limbs in such an environment would have been more hindrance than help, catching on roots and rocks, creating unnecessary width that would impede progress through tight spaces. Research published in scientific journals suggests that the ancestor of modern snakes most likely originated on the ancient supercontinent of Gondwana, which included what would become South America, Africa, India, Antarctica, and Australia before tectonic forces pulled these landmasses apart. The timing of snake evolution corresponds with a period known as the Early Cretaceous Terrestrial Revolution, a time of rapid diversification among many plant and animal groups as flowering plants began to transform terrestrial ecosystems. Within this churning cauldron of evolutionary change and opportunity, snakes found their niche, their peculiar body plan proving remarkably successful and adaptable. The crown group of snakes, meaning the common ancestor of all living snake species and their descendants, arose approximately 20 million years after the earliest snake ancestors first appeared. The snake family tree that scientists have painstakingly reconstructed through the analysis of both fossil remains and genetic data from living species reveals patterns of rapid diversification across different lineages. Various snake groups spread across the fragmenting continents, adapting to an astonishing variety of habitats and ecological roles as opportunities presented themselves. Some returned from their subterranean origins to climb trees, developing specialized adaptations for arboreal life. Others took to the water, some becoming fully aquatic marine species. Still others remained on the ground, perfecting the art of moving without limbs across every conceivable terrain from loose desert sand to dense forest floors. One of the most fascinating aspects of snake evolution is how it demonstrates the potential for major bodily transformations through relatively simple genetic changes affecting developmental processes. The study of python embryos has shown that these snakes still possess most of the genetic programming required to grow leg bones. The developmental pathway is still intact in their DNA. In python eggs, tiny limb buds actually begin to form just after the egg is laid, but within a single day, these nascent structures begin to degenerate and are reabsorbed into the body wall. This suggests that limb loss in snakes is not the result of losing genes entirely through deletion, but rather of changes in when and how those genes are expressed during development, a process scientists call heterochrony. Even more remarkably, the fossil record shows that this process was once reversible in snake evolutionary history. There is evidence that in some ancient snake lineages, hind limbs briefly re-emerged before being lost again in later generations, leading to the unusual scientific admission that the reappearance of complex anatomical structures like hind limbs did not require the complete re-evolution of lost genetic information from scratch. Evolution, it seems, can sometimes retrace its steps at least partially when the underlying genetic toolkit remains dormant but intact in the genome. As snakes diversified and spread across the planet over tens of millions of years, they developed the suite of remarkable adaptations that would allow them to become successful predators in nearly every terrestrial ecosystem and many aquatic ones. Their skulls became increasingly flexible compared to their lizard relatives, with numerous additional joints and loosely connected bones. This cranial kinesis, as it's called in technical terminology, would eventually allow snakes to swallow prey much larger than their own heads, an ability that few other vertebrates possess. Their paired organs, such as kidneys and gonads, shifted from a side-by-side arrangement to a front-to-back configuration to fit within their narrow bodies, creating an elongated internal anatomy that mirrors the external form. Most snakes reduced or lost one functional lung, streamlining their internal anatomy further to accommodate the constraints of an extremely elongated body plan. The right lung typically extends far forward in the body and may occupy half or more of the trunk length in some species, while the left lung is greatly reduced or absent entirely. This asymmetry is one of many examples of how snakes have fundamentally reorganized their internal anatomy to accommodate their unique external form. The skin of snakes developed the remarkable ability to stretch dramatically and accommodate large meals, covered in overlapping scales that provided protection while maintaining flexibility for both locomotion and feeding. The scales themselves are made of keratin, the same protein that forms human hair and fingernails, arranged in patterns that vary between species in ways that help taxonomists identify and classify different snakes. These patterns are so consistent within species and distinctive between species that scale counts and arrangements from various parts of the body serve as key identification features. Some snakes developed specialized heat-sensing organs that could detect the infrared radiation emitted by warm-blooded prey animals, giving them a sensory capability that mammals entirely lack. Others evolved potent venoms, chemical cocktails of proteins and enzymes that could immobilize prey or begin the digestive process before swallowing, turning their saliva into sophisticated biochemical weapons. The Cretaceous period, during which snakes first appeared and began their diversification, was a time of dramatic planetary changes that would reshape the distribution of life on Earth. The supercontinent Pangaea had fractured into Laurasia in the north and Gondwana in the south, and these landmasses were themselves beginning to split into the continents we recognize today. Snakes, already present and diversifying by the late Cretaceous, were well positioned to spread with these drifting landmasses as they separated over millions of years, which helps explain their nearly worldwide distribution today across all continents except Antarctica. The end of the Cretaceous period, marked by the catastrophic asteroid impact that led to the extinction of non-avian dinosaurs 66 million years ago, seems to have had relatively little effect on snakes compared to many other groups. Fossil evidence shows that most snake lineages present in the Maastrichtian Age, the final stage of the Cretaceous period just before the extinction event, continued successfully into the Paleogene period that followed. While the world changed dramatically around them, with the disappearance of dinosaurs opening new ecological niches and fundamentally restructuring terrestrial ecosystems, snakes persisted and adapted, taking advantage of new opportunities. The Paleocene epoch that followed the extinction event, alongside the adaptive radiation of mammals expanding into newly available habitats and diversifying rapidly, saw the origin of many modern snake groups. The expansion of grasslands in North America during the Miocene epoch, millions of years later between 23 and 5 million years ago, led to an explosive radiation among snakes that could exploit these new open habitats. Vipers and elapids, two major families of venomous snakes that include rattlesnakes, cobras, and coral snakes, made their first appearances in North America during this time of grassland expansion. The colubrid family, which includes the majority of living snake species today encompassing more than 1,800 species, underwent significant diversification during this period, with the origins of many modern genera dating to this epoch of environmental change and opportunity. Through all these millions of years, through continental drift and climate change, through asteroid impacts and volcanic eruptions, through the rise and fall of countless other lineages, snakes have persisted and thrived. They have adapted to changing conditions, diversified to fill available niches, specialized for particular lifestyles, and maintained remarkable success as a group. Today, with more than 4,000 species spread across every continent except Antarctica and inhabiting environments from seas to deserts to rainforests to mountains, snakes represent one of the most successful groups of terrestrial vertebrates in terms of both species diversity and ecological impact. Each species carries within its DNA the echoes of that ancient transition from limbed lizard to legless serpent. Each movement, a continuation of patterns refined across 100 million years of evolutionary time and natural selection. As you lie here in the darkness of your room, breathing slowly and evenly, feeling your body growing heavier and more relaxed with each exhalation, consider the deep time that snakes embody. They are older than mountains that have since eroded away into plains, older than rivers that have changed their courses dozens of times over geological ages. They witnessed the age of dinosaurs in their prime and survived the catastrophic ending of that era. They adapted to ice ages that covered continents in glaciers and tropical hothouse conditions when palm trees grew near the poles. And through all of this unimaginable stretches of time and change, they perfected their singular mode of existence, becoming masters of their peculiar form through countless generations of refinement. The symphony of senses, how snakes experience the world. To be a snake is to experience reality through a completely different set of sensory windows than those familiar to mammals like ourselves. As you settle deeper into relaxation, your muscles releasing their final tensions, imagine for a moment perceiving the world not primarily through sound and vision as we humans do, but through a complex symphony of chemical signals detected by taste, thermal radiation invisible to human eyes, and subtle vibrations traveling through earth and air. This is the sensory landscape that snakes navigate with remarkable precision and sophistication every moment of their waking hours. Let's begin with perhaps the most iconic aspect of snake perception: the forked tongue that flickers in and out repeatedly, sampling the air in that distinctive serpentine gesture that has captured human imagination for millennia. This tongue is not, as folklore once suggested and some people still believe, a stinger or a source of danger that can harm. Rather, it is one of the most sophisticated chemical detection systems in the animal kingdom, evolved over millions of years into an exquisitely sensitive instrument. When a snake extends its tongue outward from its mouth, the twin tips collect microscopic particles from the air and ground all around them. These particles might carry the scent of prey animals moving through the area, the pheromones of a potential mate during breeding season, or the warning signals of a predator or rival male snake marking territory. The tongue itself doesn't actually do the sensing or chemical analysis. Instead, it serves as a delivery mechanism for an extraordinary organ located in the roof of the snake's mouth. Known as the Jacobson's organ, or more formally in scientific terminology, the vomeronasal organ. This paired structure, named after Danish anatomist Ludvig Levin Jacobsen, who first described it in detail in 1811, consists of two fluid-filled sacs lined with specialized sensory cells called chemoreceptors. When the snake withdraws its tongue back into its mouth, it presses the forked tips upward into small ducts leading to the Jacobsen's organ, transferring the collected particles to the sensory epithelium within, where chemical analysis can occur. The Jacobsen's organ is exquisitely specialized for detecting non-volatile chemical compounds, substances that don't easily evaporate into the air at normal temperatures and thus cannot be detected by the ordinary sense of smell alone, which relies on airborne molecules. These non-volatile compounds include pheromones, the chemical signals that animals use to communicate complex information about reproductive status, individual identity, territory boundaries, and social hierarchy. They also include the complex molecular signatures left behind by prey animals as they move through their environment, skin oils and other secretions that adhere to surfaces and persist for hours or even days, allowing snakes to follow scent trails with extraordinary precision even long after the prey has passed through. The information from the Jacobsen's organ travels along the vomeronasal branch of the olfactory nerve directly to specialized processing centers in the brain. Interestingly, the neural pathway is anatomically distinct from that used by the snake's regular olfactory system, which functions through its external nostrils, much like the sense of smell in mammals. Snakes thus possess two separate systems for chemical detection running in parallel, each specialized for different types of molecules and different kinds of environmental information. The nasal system detects volatile airborne compounds that evaporate readily, while the vomeronasal system specializes in heavier, moisture-laden particles that must make direct contact with the sensory surface to be detected. The forked nature of the tongue serves a crucial purpose beyond simply collecting more particles across a wider area. Each fork can sample a slightly different location in space, separated by several centimeters, and by comparing the concentration of chemical signals on each tip when they're inserted into the paired Jacobsen's organs, the snake can detect gradients in scent concentration and determine the direction from which an odor originates with remarkable accuracy. This gives them a form of stereoscenting or chemosensory directionality, analogous to how our two ears allow us to locate the source of sounds through comparing the arrival time and intensity of sound waves at each ear. A snake can determine whether prey has passed to the left or right of its current position, or even if it's ahead or behind, allowing it to track moving targets even when the trail is hours old and no visual or auditory cues remain. But chemical sensing through the tongue and Jacobsen's organ is only the beginning of the snake's sophisticated perceptual toolkit. Many species, particularly pit vipers, boas, and pythons, possess another remarkable sense entirely, one that we humans lack completely and can barely imagine: the ability to see heat, or more precisely to detect infrared radiation. Scattered along their faces between the eye and nostril or along the lips are specialized organs called pit organs that detect the infrared radiation emitted by warm-blooded animals as a natural consequence of their metabolism. In pit vipers such as rattlesnakes, copperheads, and the bushmasters of Central and South America, these organs appear as a pair of facial pits, one on each side of the head positioned slightly below and forward of the eyes. In boas and pythons, the heat-sensing pits are distributed along the upper and sometimes lower lip scales, appearing as a series of small depressions or holes that give certain species a distinctive appearance. These pit organs are genuine marvels of biological engineering that would impress any physicist, sensitive enough to detect temperature changes as small as 3/1000ths of a degree Celsius, approximately 0.003 degrees, from up to a meter away. They are lined with a thin membrane densely packed with nerve endings connected to the trigeminal nerve, the same nerve that carries sensation from the face in mammals. The heat radiated by a warm-blooded animal such as a mouse or bird causes minute temperature changes in this membrane despite the distance, which the nerve endings detect and report to the brain through rapid electrical signals. Remarkably, the neural signals from the pit organs are processed in the optic tectum, the same brain region that handles visual information from the eyes. This means that the infrared data is integrated with visible light information from the eyes, creating a combined sensory image that humans can scarcely imagine or comprehend. A snake with functional pit organs essentially sees in two different wavelengths simultaneously, creating what must be an utterly unique perceptual experience. It perceives both the visible light that we see, the reflection of photons off surfaces creating shapes and colors and contrasts, and also the infrared signature of warm objects, appearing perhaps as glowing forms against a cooler background, heat images overlaid on visual ones. This dual vision is particularly useful for nocturnal hunting when visible light is minimal, allowing snakes to locate and precisely strike warm-blooded prey even in complete darkness when the eyes alone would be useless. Studies using controlled experiments have shown that pythons can sense the heat signature of prey from approximately 30 centimeters away with enough precision to strike accurately, while pit vipers, with their more sophisticated and isolated pit organ structure, can detect thermal signatures from up to 100 centimeters distant or even farther for very warm targets. The vision of snakes in the visible spectrum varies considerably among species and is generally well suited to their particular ecological niche and activity patterns. Tree-dwelling snakes typically have better developed vision with more acute focus than burrowing species, which makes intuitive sense given that there's little use for keen eyesight in the perpetual darkness underground where visual information is unavailable. The eyes of snakes are fundamentally similar to ours in basic structure and organization, with a lens to focus light, a retina to detect it, and a generally spherical eyeball to maintain proper geometry. However, they lack movable eyelids, instead having a transparent scale called a spectacle or brill that covers and protects the eye at all times. This spectacle is replaced each time the snake sheds its entire skin, and as the time for shedding approaches, fluid accumulates between the old and new spectacle layers, giving the snake's eyes a milky, opaque appearance that temporarily reduces vision and makes many snakes more defensive and irritable during this vulnerable period. Most snakes can see color to some degree, possessing cone cells in their retinas that are sensitive to different wavelengths of light across the visible spectrum, though the specific range of colors they perceive and how they process color information varies considerably by species based on their evolutionary history and lifestyle. Diurnal snakes, those active primarily during daylight hours, generally have better color vision with a higher proportion of cone cells relative to rod cells. Nocturnal species have more rod cells, which are sensitive to low light conditions and allow vision in near darkness but don't discriminate between different wavelengths and thus don't provide color information. Some snakes have slit-shaped pupils that can expand or contract dramatically to control the amount of light entering the eye across a wide range of lighting conditions, an adaptation common in species that are active in varied lighting conditions or that transition between day and night activity. The pupil shape itself can provide reliable clues to a snake's lifestyle and activity patterns for those familiar with these correlations. Round pupils are typical of diurnal species and those active in relatively constant lighting conditions, whether bright or dim. Vertical slit pupils are common in nocturnal and crepuscular snakes active at dawn and dusk, as the slit can open very wide in darkness to admit maximum available light, but can contract to a tiny aperture in bright conditions, protecting the sensitive retina from damage. Some specialized species, like the Asian vine snakes of the genus Ahatula, have horizontal keyhole-shaped pupils aligned with a groove running along the snout that enhances their depth perception and ability to detect the slightest movement among branches and foliage where they hunt for lizards and frogs. In the realm of hearing, snakes present an interesting and somewhat paradoxical case that confused scientists for many years. They lack external ears entirely, having no ear openings visible on the surface of their heads anywhere. They also lack a middle ear cavity and tympanic membrane, the eardrum that vibrates in response to airborne sound waves in most tetrapods, including amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. For decades, this led to the widespread assumption that snakes were completely deaf, unable to hear sounds in any form as we conceive of hearing. However, this assumption was incorrect, based on an overly narrow definition of hearing. Snakes can indeed detect sounds, particularly low-frequency vibrations, through an alternate pathway that doesn't require external ears or eardrums. The key to understanding snake hearing lies in a small bone called the columella, which in snakes extends from the inner ear forward to connect with the quadrate bone, a skull bone involved in the articulation of the lower jaw with the skull. Vibrations traveling through the ground are transmitted through the snake's jaw and skull bones to the columella, which then conducts these signals to the inner ear where they stimulate hair cells just as airborne sounds do in humans. Additionally, snakes may be able to detect some airborne low-frequency sounds, particularly those in the range of 150 to 600 Hz, through this same pathway as sound waves cause subtle vibrations in the skull bones themselves. While they certainly don't hear in the same way mammals do with directional external ears and sensitive eardrums, they are far from deaf, instead being exquisitely attuned to the vibrational landscape of their environment in ways that serve their needs perfectly. This vibrational sensitivity means that a snake resting motionless on the ground with its head down can detect the approach of prey or predators through the tremors created by footsteps traveling through the substrate. Each footfall, whether from a tiny mouse or a large deer, sends ripples of compression waves through the earth, and the snake's jaw, pressed against the substrate, picks up these signals and interprets them through neural processing specialized for this purpose over millions of years. The snake can determine not only that something is approaching, but often how far away it is based on the strength of vibrations and even potentially what kind of animal it might be based on the pattern of footfalls. In a very real sense, snakes hear through their bones, feeling sound as much as hearing it in the conventional sense, a fundamentally different sensory experience than what we know. The integration of all these different sensory modalities creates a perceptual world that is alien yet elegant, foreign yet functional. A hunting snake resting in ambush might first detect prey through ground vibrations transmitted through its jaw, alerting it to approach from a particular direction. As the prey draws nearer, chemical signals collected by the tongue and processed through the Jacobson's organ provide identification of species and precise location, telling the snake whether this is appropriate prey or a potential threat to avoid. If the snake possesses pit organs, the thermal signature of the warm-blooded prey becomes visible as it enters range, allowing the snake to judge distance and trajectory with precision even if visual conditions are poor. Finally, the eyes provide visual confirmation and fine detail, guiding the final strike with accuracy to vital areas. Each sense complements the others, creating a robust and redundant system that allows snakes to function effectively in diverse environments and conditions, both day and night. A snake hunting in pitch darkness relies more heavily on thermal and chemical cues since vision provides little information, while one active during the day might depend more on vision supplemented by other senses. Burrowing snakes, living in a world where vision provides almost no useful information due to the absence of light underground, have reduced eyes but massively enhanced chemical detection through larger Jacobson's organs. Aquatic snakes must cope with water that scatters and absorbs light differently than air does and that carries chemical signals in different ways, and they have evolved accordingly, with some species having eyes positioned on top of the head to scan the surface while the body remains submerged, and nostrils that can close tightly to prevent water entry. There's something deeply meditative and calming about contemplating these alternative ways of sensing reality, these fundamentally different windows onto the same physical world we inhabit. It reminds us that the world we experience through our human senses, as vivid and complete as it seems to us, is not the only world, not the complete picture of reality, but rather one perspective among countless others evolved by different lineages. The snake, flicking its tongue repeatedly and processing invisible thermal radiation that our eyes cannot see, inhabits the same physical spaces we do, slithers across the same ground, basks in the same sunlight, but experiences them in profoundly different ways shaped by millions of years of adaptation. And in this difference lies not inferiority or limitation compared to human perception, but rather specialization and adaptation, each sense honed by natural selection to extract precisely the information needed for survival in that particular way of life. As your breathing continues its slow, rhythmic pattern, as the weight of your body sinks further into the mattress and the boundaries between yourself and the bed seem to blur, consider the snake as a model of focused perception and efficient information processing. It does not try to sense everything at once in all possible ways, but rather attends to the signals that matter most in its particular situation at that moment. It filters out irrelevant noise and background stimulation and homes in on what's essential. The chemical trail of prey moving through its territory, the thermal bloom of body heat indicating warm-blooded prey nearby, the subtle tremor of approaching footsteps warning of danger or announcing opportunity. There's wisdom in this kind of selective attention, a lesson perhaps in how we might navigate our own sensory-rich world with greater calm and purpose, focusing on what truly matters rather than trying to process everything simultaneously. The poetry of serpentine locomotion. Each sense complements the others, creating a robust and redundant system that allows snakes to function effectively in diverse environments and conditions, both day and night. A snake hunting in pitch darkness relies more heavily on thermal and chemical cues since vision provides little information, while one active during the day might depend more on vision supplemented by other senses. Burrowing snakes, living in a world where vision provides almost no useful information due to the absence of light underground, have reduced eyes but massively enhanced chemical detection through larger Jacobson's organs. Aquatic snakes must cope with water that scatters and absorbs light differently than air does and that carries chemical signals in different ways, and they have evolved accordingly, with some species having eyes positioned on top of the head to scan the surface while the body remains submerged, and nostrils that can close tightly to prevent water entry. There's something deeply meditative and calming about contemplating these alternative ways of sensing reality, these fundamentally different windows onto the same physical world we inhabit. It reminds us that the world we experience through our human senses, as vivid and complete as it seems to us, is not the only world, not the complete picture of reality, but rather one perspective among countless others evolved by different lineages. The snake, flicking its tongue repeatedly and processing invisible thermal radiation that our eyes cannot see, inhabits the same physical spaces we do, slithers across the same ground, basks in the same sunlight, but experiences them in profoundly different ways shaped by millions of years of adaptation. And in this difference lies not inferiority or limitation compared to human perception, but rather specialization and adaptation, each sense honed by natural selection to extract precisely the information needed for survival in that particular way of life. As your breathing continues its slow, rhythmic pattern, as the weight of your body sinks further into the mattress and the boundaries between yourself and the bed seem to blur, consider the snake as a model of focused perception and efficient information processing. It does not try to sense everything at once in all possible ways, but rather attends to the signals that matter most in its particular situation at that moment. It filters out irrelevant noise and background stimulation and homes in on what's essential. The chemical trail of prey moving through its territory, the thermal bloom of body heat indicating warm-blooded prey nearby, the subtle tremor of approaching footsteps warning of danger or announcing opportunity. There's wisdom in this kind of selective attention, a lesson perhaps in how we might navigate our own sensory-rich world with greater calm and purpose, focusing on what truly matters rather than trying to process everything simultaneously. The complete absence of limbs would seem, at first consideration, to be a severe handicap to locomotion and movement. How does an animal move effectively without legs to push against the ground, without arms to pull itself forward, without appendages to provide leverage? Yet snakes, through millions of years of evolutionary refinement and countless generations of natural selection, have not merely overcome this apparent limitation, but have transformed it into a strength and source of versatility. They are capable of moving through environments that would challenge many limbed animals, navigating spaces too narrow for creatures with protruding limbs, and they do so with an efficiency and grace that has inspired countless observers throughout human history, from ancient myths to modern robotics engineers. Snakes employ at least 4 distinct modes of terrestrial locomotion, each suited to different terrain and circumstances, each the product of specialized muscular control and body mechanics. Some snake species are capable of using all 4 methods, switching between them fluidly as conditions demand and the substrate changes. Others specialize in particular modes that best suit their anatomy and ecological niche and rarely use alternatives. This versatility is part of what makes snakes so successful as a group, allowing them to inhabit environments ranging from loose desert sands to forest canopies, from underground tunnels to water surfaces, from smooth rock faces to dense vegetation. The most familiar and recognizable mode of snake movement is called lateral undulation, sometimes referred to simply as serpentine locomotion due to its characteristic S-shaped curves that we associate with the very word serpent. This is the sinuous side-to-side motion that most people envision when they picture a snake moving across the ground. In lateral undulation, waves of muscular contraction travel sequentially down the length of the snake's body from head to tail, creating alternating curves that bend to the left and right in smooth, continuous motion. The snake pushes these curves against any irregularities in the terrain, rocks or pebbles, clumps of vegetation, ridges in the soil, anything that provides resistance and a point to push against. Each push propels the snake forward smoothly, the body following the precise path traced by the head moments before, like cars following the engine of a train along a winding track laid down by the locomotive. The key to successful lateral undulation is friction and resistance. The snake needs multiple points of resistance against which to push simultaneously along its body length, which is why this method works beautifully on natural terrain with its inevitable irregularities, but fails completely on perfectly smooth surfaces like glass or highly polished metal or ice. A snake placed on such a perfectly smooth surface will thrash and writhe but make essentially no forward progress, the curves of its body finding nothing to push against, all force directed uselessly into the frictionless substrate. In nature, however, such perfectly smooth surfaces essentially don't exist outside of water, and lateral undulation serves as the default mode of locomotion for the majority of snake species in most typical situations they encounter. The mechanics of this movement are elegant in their complexity and coordination. Large muscles along the snake's back and sides, organized into distinct muscle groups on each side of the vertebral column, contract sequentially along the body in precisely coordinated patterns. In each bend, the muscles on the outside of the curve, the convex side, are active and contracting, pulling that section of the body inward and creating the wave-like motion. As the snake progresses forward, each point along its body follows precisely the same path through space, passing over the exact same points of contact with the ground. This requires extraordinary sensory-motor control, the ability to remember and precisely replicate the positions and movements of body sections that have already passed, integrating information from the entire body length spanning dozens or even hundreds of vertebrae depending on the species. Interestingly, when snakes swim through water, they use a form of lateral undulation very similar to their terrestrial version, though adapted to the different physics of aquatic environments. In water, the snake doesn't need fixed points to push against as it does on land. Instead, it pushes against the water itself, and the resistance of the fluid provides the necessary reaction force according to Newton's third law of motion. The undulations of a swimming snake tend to have larger amplitude, bigger side-to-side waves, than those used on land, as water offers less resistance than solid obstacles and the snake can achieve greater speeds with more exaggerated curves. Many aquatic and semi-aquatic species have laterally compressed bodies, flattened from side to side like a ribbon, which increases the surface area pushing against the water and improves swimming efficiency significantly. The second major mode of locomotion is called concertina movement, named for its resemblance to the opening and closing of an accordion or concertina musical instrument in a back-and-forth pattern. This method is typically used when the snake is moving through confined spaces such as burrows, narrow tunnels, crevices in rock faces, or dense vegetation where lateral undulation isn't feasible because there isn't room for the side-to-side curves. In concertina locomotion, the snake anchors the posterior part of its body, often by pressing outward against the walls of a tunnel or by gripping irregularities in the surface with its scales. With the rear portion firmly anchored in place, the snake extends the front portion of its body forward as far as possible, straightening out the anterior curves. Once fully extended forward, the head and front body sections secure themselves against the substrate, and then the posterior portion is drawn forward in accordion-like folds, bringing it up to meet the anchored front section. The cycle then repeats with the rear anchoring again, the snake progressing in a series of reaching and gathering movements that look almost like an inchworm but with much more body involved. Concertina movement requires tremendous muscular effort compared to other modes, as the snake must support its body weight or resist gravity using static muscle contraction while either the front or back is moving, and it is relatively slow compared to lateral undulation or the other modes. However, it excels in situations where lateral undulation cannot function due to space constraints or lack of lateral resistance points. A snake climbing a vertical cylinder, such as a tree trunk or pipe, uses a form of concertina movement, coiling around the trunk to maintain grip through friction and pressure while extending upward, then releasing the lower coils and drawing them up to the new position once the upper body is secured. The ability to switch to concertina movement is part of what allows snakes to be so versatile in navigating complex three-dimensional environments, enabling them to traverse vertical surfaces and narrow spaces that would be impossible using only lateral undulation. The third mode is called rectilinear locomotion, or sometimes caterpillar locomotion due to its visual resemblance to how caterpillars move forward in a straight line. In this method, the snake moves in a nearly straight line rather than in curves or zigzags, the body appearing to flow forward like a conveyor belt. Unlike the other modes, rectilinear locomotion does not involve bending the vertebral column side to side at all. Instead, it relies entirely on the movement of the skin relative to the underlying skeleton and muscles. The snake has specialized muscles called costocutaneous muscles that connect the ribs directly to the skin of the belly. These muscles contract and relax in traveling waves down the length of the body, lifting sections of the ventral scales, moving them forward along the body, and then setting them down against the substrate while the next section lifts and advances. The result is a movement where the snake's belly scales appear to flow forward in discrete steps like tank treads, while the body itself moves smoothly at a constant speed without any lateral motion. Rectilinear locomotion is extremely slow compared to other modes, typically only reaching speeds of 1 to 6 centimeters per second depending on the size of the snake, but it has distinct advantages in specific situations. It is almost completely silent, producing virtually no vibrations that might alert prey to the snake's approach or warn it of the predator's presence. The snake's body remains relatively straight, with minimal vertical or lateral movement, making it very difficult to detect visually against the background since there's no obvious motion to catch the eye. This makes rectilinear locomotion the preferred method for stalking prey and approaching it undetected, particularly for large-bodied snakes like pythons, boa constrictors, and some of the larger vipers that hunt primarily by ambush rather than active pursuit. Additionally, rectilinear locomotion is extremely useful after feeding when the snake has consumed a large meal. When a snake has swallowed prey that might be 20, 30, or even 40% of its own body weight, its body is massively distended and relatively inflexible, the vertebral column stretched and unable to bend much laterally without risk of injury or regurgitation of the meal. This makes the bending required for lateral undulation difficult or impossible for a period after feeding that might last hours or days depending on meal size. Rectilinear movement, which doesn't require any vertebral bending, allows the snake to move even when its body is stretched around a large meal. The ability to move at all in such a state is remarkable and speaks to the flexibility inherent in serpentine biomechanics and the redundancy of having multiple locomotive modes available. The fourth and perhaps most visually striking and unusual mode of locomotion is sidewinding, used primarily by snakes living in desert environments with loose, shifting sand that won't support the static contact points needed for other forms of movement. Sidewinding is a highly specialized form of locomotion that minimizes the amount of the snake's body in contact with the hot sand at any given moment, reducing heat absorption that could be dangerous, and prevents the snake from sinking into or slipping on the unstable substrate which offers little friction. In sidewinding, The snake lifts loops of its body off the ground and throws them ahead to land ahead of and to the side of its current position, while simultaneously lifting other sections that had been providing static contact with the surface. The result is a movement where the snake appears to roll sideways across the sand rather than moving in the direction its head points, leaving behind a characteristic series of J-shaped tracks that are instantly recognizable to desert trackers. The body is almost always in static contact with the ground where it touches, meaning there's no sliding or slipping motion, only the lifting and placing of body sections in a precise sequence. This is quite different from lateral undulation, where sliding contact with the substrate is continuous and necessary. The snake's head seems to be thrown forward and to the side in a smooth arc, and then the body follows in a flowing wave from front to back, each section lifting off from where it had been and coming down ahead of the previous track in a beautiful rhythmic pattern. Sidewinding is remarkably fast given the constraints of moving on loose sand, with species like the sidewinder rattlesnake capable of achieving speeds up to 18 miles per hour using this method when motivated, making it one of the fastest modes of snake locomotion. It's also highly efficient energetically on slippery or yielding surfaces where other forms of locomotion would be exhausting or impossible, allowing desert snakes to move effectively across dunes and sandy flats. The snake can even use sidewinding to climb sandy slopes, adjusting the proportion of its body in contact with the sand to match the reduced stability of the inclined surface and prevent sliding backward. Research using high-speed cameras and detailed track analysis has shown that sidewinding snakes increase their contact area significantly on steeper slopes, preventing them from slipping backward down the face, and can successfully ascend angles up to the maximum stable slope angle for the particular sand grain size in question, typically around 30 to 35 degrees. The ability to switch between these different modes of locomotion depending on circumstances gives snakes a remarkable advantage in navigating diverse terrains and microhabitats. A single snake moving through its natural habitat during a typical day might use lateral undulation while crossing open ground with its scattered rocks and vegetation, switch to concertina movement when climbing into a shrub or navigating through dense grass stems, employ rectilinear locomotion while stalking prey that it's detected ahead, and use a combination of methods when navigating complex, three-dimensional structures like rock piles or fallen trees. This behavioral flexibility, combined with the fundamental anatomical flexibility of the serpentine body plan with its many vertebrae and lack of rigid trunk structure, allows snakes to be one of the most ecologically diverse and habitat-flexible groups of vertebrates on the planet. Researchers studying snake locomotion have used high-speed cameras, motion capture systems, and electromyography, a technique that measures the electrical activity of muscles using fine wire electrodes, to understand exactly how snakes coordinate their hundreds of vertebrae and ribs during movement and how they switch between different gaits. The patterns that emerge from these studies reveal a sophisticated neural control system that can independently activate different muscle groups along the body's length in traveling waves, and switch between different motor programs depending on the terrain and situation being encountered. In some sense, the snake's body is not controlled as a single unit with one pattern, but rather as a series of somewhat independent modules that can be coordinated in various ways to produce the appropriate gait for the current need, with sensory feedback from the skin and muscles allowing real-time adjustment. This modularity extends even to remarkable situations where a snake might use two different locomotion modes simultaneously in different parts of its body for maximum efficiency. A snake climbing through narrow branches in a shrub might use lateral undulation in its anterior portion where there are points to push against, while employing concertina movement in the posterior section to maintain grip and security against falling. The snake's nervous system manages this dual-mode coordination seamlessly, adjusting in real time to the changing demands of the environment and maintaining balance and progress simultaneously. It's a stunning demonstration of neural control and muscular coordination that most vertebrates simply cannot achieve. There's something deeply soothing and almost hypnotic about watching a snake move, whether in person or in slow-motion video. There's a quality to the smooth flowing of curves, the perfect geometric precision of sidewinding tracks in pristine sand, the absolutely smooth glide of a snake in rectilinear motion where the body seems to flow forward like liquid. The movement embodies efficiency and elegance, adaptability and grace, a kind of liquid poetry that seems almost independent of the physical constraints we associate with terrestrial locomotion. It reminds us that there is always more than one solution to any problem, more than one way to navigate the world and accomplish necessary tasks. The loss of limbs, which might seem to us an insurmountable disability when we imagine ourselves in that situation, becomes through millions of years of evolution not a limitation but an opportunity for innovation, for the development of entirely new and extraordinarily effective modes of being and moving through the world. As you continue to relax, your own body still and comfortable and sinking deeper into rest, consider the snake's mastery of movement without the need for legs or arms or any appendages. There's a profound lesson here in adaptation and acceptance, in making the most of what one has rather than lamenting what one lacks or wishing for different circumstances. The snake's evolutionary success doesn't come from forcing itself to move like a lizard despite its lack of legs, from trying to be something it's not, but rather from fully embracing its limbless form and discovering all the novel possibilities it offers. In the same way, our own greatest successes often come not from trying to be something we're not or wishing we had different talents or circumstances, but from fully understanding and utilizing what we already are and have. Gentle giants and tiny wonders. The diversity of snake species. The world of snakes encompasses a staggering range of sizes, from creatures so small they can rest comfortably on a coin with room to spare to giants capable of overpowering prey as large as adult deer or even, in rare cases, attacks on humans. This tremendous size variation, spanning several orders of magnitude from smallest to largest, is more extreme than in almost any other group of terrestrial vertebrates, reflecting the extraordinary diversity of ecological niches that snakes have come to occupy over their 100-million-year evolutionary history. As we explore the spectrum from the minuscule to the massive, let the sheer variety of form and lifestyle serve as a reminder of nature's endless creativity and the myriad solutions evolution can discover for the challenge of survival. At the smallest extreme, living at the very lower limit of what's possible for a snake, we find the thread snakes, delicate creatures that represent the physical minimum size for snake morphology given the constraints of vertebrate biology. The Barbados thread snake, scientifically named Tetrachylostoma carli in recent taxonomic revisions though formerly known as Leptotyphlops carli, holds the current record as the world's smallest snake species by length and mass. Adults of this species average approximately 10 centimeters in total length, about 4 inches, roughly the length of your thumb from tip to base, with the largest recorded individual measuring just 10.4 centimeters. These snakes are so thin they resemble earthworms or pieces of dark thread laid on the ground, hence their common name thread snake, and they're easily overlooked even when they're right in front of someone. The Barbados thread snake was first identified as a distinct species separate from related thread snakes in the year 2008 by herpetologist Blair Hedges during research on Caribbean biodiversity, who named it after his wife, Carla and Hass, in recognition of her support of his work. The species is endemic to the island of Barbados, found only in the eastern portion of that small Caribbean island nation and nowhere else on Earth. These snakes live underground in the topsoil layer, spending their entire lives hidden beneath rocks and within the leaf litter of forests, emerging only rarely if ever onto the surface, even at night. They feed almost exclusively on the larvae and pupae of ants and termites, using their tiny size to access the narrow galleries of social insect colonies that larger predators cannot reach. Their tiny size, remarkable and cute though it may seem, is not random but rather represents something close to a biological minimum, a hard lower limit imposed by the physics of metabolism and the requirements of reproduction. Research on the size limits of snakes has revealed fascinating constraints imposed by the fundamental requirements of producing viable offspring that can survive to reproduce in turn. The smallest snakes produce only one egg or give birth to only one offspring at a time, and that single egg or offspring is relatively enormous compared to the size of the mother, sometimes accounting for nearly half her body length. In Barbados thread snakes, the single egg produced occupies a significant portion of the mother's body cavity when it's developing. This is because the hatchling must be large enough when it emerges to survive and hunt successfully in the real world, which means it must be above a certain minimum size to consume the available prey items, primarily ant and termite larvae that themselves have a fixed minimum size. If a thread snake were to produce 2 smaller eggs instead of 1 large one, each offspring would be half the normal size, potentially too small to successfully feed and survive to reproductive maturity, and natural selection would eliminate this strategy. Natural selection has apparently pushed snake minimum size right up against this hard reproductive limit, where successful reproduction requires producing offspring close to half the parent's size, representing an enormous investment. This is in stark contrast to large snakes like anacondas or pythons, where offspring might be only 1/10 or even 1/20th the length of an adult, representing a much smaller proportion of parental size and allowing for much larger litters. Moving up the size spectrum, we encounter a vast middle range of snake species, spanning from small colubrids measuring 50 centimeters to medium-sized vipers and tree snakes measuring 1 to 2 meters in length. These species represent the majority of snake diversity, thousands of species, and occupy nearly every conceivable terrestrial and freshwater habitat across all continents except Antarctica. There are burrowing species like the various blind snakes and worm snakes that spend their entire lives underground in the soil, some with greatly reduced eyes that can only distinguish light from dark and lack any ability to form images. These underground species typically have smooth, shiny scales that reduce friction as they push through soil, reinforced skulls to withstand pressure, and cylindrical bodies of uniform diameter from head to tail. There are arboreal specialists like the vine snakes and tree boas, with elongated, laterally compressed bodies that are almost ribbon-like in cross-section. This body shape distributes their weight along thin branches like a weight distributed along a beam, preventing the branch from bending excessively and allowing them to reach surprising distances across gaps between branches without falling. Many arboreal species have prehensile tails that can grip branches, effectively giving them a fifth point of contact for navigation through the three-dimensional maze of the forest canopy. Their coloration is often bright green or brown with patterns that mimic leaves, bark, or filtered sunlight and shadow, providing excellent camouflage in their vertical world. Aquatic and semi-aquatic species have evolved numerous parallel adaptations for life in water across multiple independent evolutionary lineages. True sea snakes possess flattened, paddle-like tails that they undulate from side to side for propulsion through water, functioning like the tail of a fish, and specialized salt glands located under the tongue that allow them to excrete excess salt absorbed from their marine environment. Without these glands, the salt concentration in their blood would rise to toxic levels within days. Many aquatic snakes have nostrils positioned on top of the snout rather than on the sides, allowing them to breathe while the rest of the head remains submerged just below the surface. Water snakes of various families in both fresh and salt water show these convergent adaptations, including streamlined bodies for reduced drag, reduced ventral scales since they don't need them for terrestrial locomotion, and behavioral specializations for hunting fish and amphibians that are themselves excellent swimmers. In tropical rainforests found in South America, Southeast Asia, and Central Africa, a different suite of adaptations appears repeatedly across different snake lineages. Many rainforest snakes are brilliant green, camouflaged perfectly among the foliage where they spend their lives hunting for birds, frogs, and lizards. Others are patterned in complex arrangements of browns, blacks, tans, and creams that break up their outline when they rest among fallen leaves and sun-dappled shadows on the forest floor, making them nearly invisible despite being right there. Some rainforest species have developed extreme specializations, like the flying snakes of the genus Chrysopelea that can flatten their bodies and glide between trees by launching themselves from high branches and undulating their bodies in midair to maintain control and extend their glide distance up to 100 meters or more. At the largest end of the size spectrum, we find the true giants of the snake world, animals that capture our imagination and sometimes our nightmares. The green anaconda, Unex murinus, holds the title of world's heaviest snake species, with exceptional individuals reported to exceed 227 kilograms, around 500 pounds. These massive snakes inhabit the swamps, rivers, and slow-moving streams of South America, spending much of their time in water where their bulk is supported by buoyancy. Female green anacondas are significantly larger than males, a pattern called sexual size dimorphism that's common in snakes but especially pronounced in anacondas where females can be several times the mass of males. The reticulated python, Python reticulatus, native to Southeast Asia, challenges the anaconda for the title of longest snake species, with authenticated records of individuals exceeding 7 meters in length, around 23 feet, and unverified reports of specimens up to 10 meters or more. These snakes are found in rainforests but also adapt well to human-modified landscapes, sometimes taking up residence near villages where domestic animals provide easy prey. Their name comes from their distinctive pattern of interlocking diamond shapes that create a net-like or reticulated appearance, providing excellent camouflage in their dappled forest habitat. These giant constrictors eat prey that seems impossibly large, including pigs, deer, and large rodents like capybaras. After consuming such massive meals, which can exceed their own body weight, they may not eat again for weeks or even months, their metabolism slowing dramatically as they digest. During this time, they're vulnerable and tend to remain hidden and inactive, all their energy directed toward breaking down and absorbing nutrients from their enormous meal. Between the extremes of 4-inch thread snakes and 20-foot pythons lies virtually every conceivable size and shape of snake, each adapted to its particular lifestyle. There are snakes specialized for eating eggs who have special spine-like projections extending down into their throat that help crack shells. There are snakes that eat only other snakes, with specialized venom and behaviors for subduing prey that itself might be venomous and dangerous. There are snakes that live their entire lives in water and give birth to live young, never emerging onto land. There are snakes that live in trees and never descend to the ground, and snakes that live under the ground and never surface except by accident when their tunnels are excavated. The diversity of color patterns in snakes is equally remarkable, ranging from species that are entirely black to snakes with elaborate patterns of stripes, blotches, bands, and diamonds in virtually every color combination imaginable. Some of these patterns serve as camouflage, breaking up the snake's outline against complex backgrounds. Others serve as warning coloration, advertising dangerous venom with bright colors that predators learn to avoid. Still others may function in thermoregulation, with darker snakes absorbing more heat in cooler climates and lighter snakes reflecting more radiation in desert environments. The venomous snakes, comprising about 15% of all snake species, include some of the most specialized predators on Earth. Vipers have long, hollow fangs that fold back against the roof of the mouth when not in use and swing forward when the mouth opens to strike. Elapids like cobras, mambas, and coral snakes have shorter fixed fangs and must bite and chew slightly to inject venom. Rear-fanged snakes like the boomslang have enlarged teeth at the back of the mouth and must chew on prey to envenomate it. Each group has evolved its venom delivery system independently, and each group's venom has a different composition and effect, from neurotoxins that paralyze the nervous system to hemotoxins that destroy blood cells and tissue. Despite their reputation, the vast majority of snake species are completely harmless to humans, lacking venom or possessing venom so mild it has no effect on large mammals. Most snakes are secretive and avoid human contact whenever possible, fleeing or remaining motionless and hoping not to be noticed. The dangerous encounters that do occur usually happen when humans accidentally step on or corner snakes, triggering defensive behavior. In their natural role, snakes are important predators of rodents, helping control populations that would otherwise damage crops and spread disease. As you lie here contemplating this enormous diversity, from snakes smaller than your finger to snakes longer than most cars, let it remind you of the countless ways to exist in this world. There's no single right way to be a snake, no optimal size or lifestyle. Instead, there are thousands of solutions, each perfectly suited to its particular circumstances, each successful in its own way. The tiny thread snake living under a rock is no less successful than the giant anaconda in the river. Each has found its place. Each continues its lineage. In our own lives, we sometimes imagine there's one right path, one correct way to be, but the natural world shows us again and again that diversity itself is the strategy, that countless different approaches all lead to success. The art of survival, feeding, hunting, and patience. The feeding ecology of snakes reveals some of the most remarkable adaptations in the animal kingdom, strategies refined over millions of years for capturing and consuming prey without the aid of limbs to hold or manipulate food. Snakes are obligate carnivores, meaning they eat only animal matter and cannot digest plant material, though different species have specialized on every conceivable type of prey, from insects to mammals to birds to fish to other reptiles and even other snakes. The methods they use to capture and subdue prey are as varied as the snakes themselves, ranging from simple pursuit and grabbing to elaborate ambush strategies to the use of constriction or venom, and sometimes combinations of all these approaches. Let's begin with constriction, perhaps the most iconic snake predation method, brought to popular attention by countless nature documentaries showing massive pythons or boas wrapped around their prey. Despite its familiarity, constriction is widely misunderstood. The popular image of snakes crushing their prey, breaking bones and pulverizing internal organs through sheer pressure, is dramatic but largely incorrect. Recent research using sophisticated monitoring equipment has revealed that constriction actually works through a much more subtle and efficient mechanism: circulatory arrest. When a constricting snake captures prey, it loops its body around the animal in coils, with each loop often overlapping the previous one to prevent any gaps through which the prey might escape. The snake then tightens these coils, but the pressure applied is not constant. Instead, the snake monitors the prey through sensory nerves in its skin that can detect the minute vibrations of the heartbeat and the expansion of the chest during breathing. Each time the prey exhales, the snake tightens slightly, preventing full inhalation on the next breath. Each time the heart beats, the snake adjusts pressure, using that signal to gauge how much force to apply. Studies using rats instrumented with pressure sensors and electrocardiogram monitors have shown that constricted prey loses consciousness very quickly, typically within seconds, as blood flow to the brain is interrupted. The constricting coils compress not just the lungs but also the major blood vessels, particularly the arteries carrying oxygenated blood from the heart. This causes blood pressure to drop dramatically, starving the brain of oxygen. Meanwhile, the veins returning blood to the heart are also compressed, preventing the heart from refilling properly between beats. The combination of these effects leads to rapid cardiac arrest, often within a minute or less, with large prey taking only slightly longer than small prey. The snake can detect when the heart stops beating through those same sensory nerves in its skin, feeling the cessation of that rhythmic pulse that it has been monitoring throughout the constriction. Only then does it begin to release its coils and reposition the prey for swallowing. This is a remarkably efficient killing method that minimizes the risk to the snake from prey that might bite, scratch, or kick if given the opportunity. By inducing rapid unconsciousness and cardiac arrest, the snake eliminates any possibility of retaliation or escape, and it does so using relatively little energy compared to methods that require extended struggling or repeated strikes. The evolution of constriction appears to have occurred multiple times independently in different snake lineages, a clear example of convergent evolution where similar environmental pressures lead to similar solutions. Boas, pythons, and many colubrids all use constriction but are not closely related to each other, having evolved this method separately. The fact that constriction evolved repeatedly suggests it's a highly effective predation strategy that provides significant advantages, particularly for snakes hunting prey that might be close to their own size or larger, where a single bite might not be sufficient to subdue the animal quickly. Venom represents an alternative solution to the problem of subduing prey, one that evolved independently in several lineages and then diversified extensively. Snake venoms are complex mixtures of proteins and enzymes, typically containing dozens or even hundreds of different compounds, each potentially affecting different physiological systems in the prey. The composition of venom varies dramatically between species and even between different populations of the same species, reflecting adaptation to different prey types and local conditions. Broadly, snake venoms can be classified into several functional categories, though most venoms contain elements of multiple types. Neurotoxic venoms contain compounds that interfere with nerve function, blocking the transmission of signals from nerves to muscles and causing progressive paralysis. These venoms are characteristic of elapids like cobras, mambas, and coral snakes. A bite from a highly neurotoxic snake causes relatively little pain or swelling at the bite site initially, but the victim becomes increasingly paralyzed over minutes to hours, eventually unable to breathe as the respiratory muscles cease to function. This type of venom is particularly effective against warm-blooded prey like birds and mammals that rely on continuous breathing. Hemotoxic venoms, characteristic of vipers and pit vipers, attack the blood and cardiovascular system through different mechanisms. Some components destroy red blood cells, causing them to burst and release their contents. Others attack the walls of blood vessels, causing them to leak and leading to internal hemorrhaging. Still others affect blood clotting, either promoting excessive clotting that can block blood vessels or preventing clotting entirely so that the victim bleeds continuously from the bite wound and internally. Hemotoxic bites are typically extremely painful and cause dramatic swelling and discoloration around the bite site as blood leaks into the tissues. Cytotoxic venoms contain enzymes that destroy cells and tissue directly, essentially beginning the digestive process before the prey is even swallowed. These venoms cause extensive local tissue damage around the bite site, with cells dying and breaking down. While this seems inefficient as a killing method compared to neurotoxic or hemotoxic effects, the digestive enzymes serve a dual purpose, both helping to subdue prey through pain and tissue damage and beginning the breakdown of tissue that will continue after swallowing. Most snake venoms contain elements of all these categories plus additional unique compounds, creating a sophisticated biochemical cocktail tailored to the snake's typical prey. The venom of a snake that primarily eats mammals will have evolved to be particularly effective against mammalian physiology, while a snake specializing in lizards might have venom optimized for reptilian biochemistry. This specificity means that venom highly dangerous to the snake's natural prey might have minimal effects on other animal groups, and indeed some animals have evolved resistance to the venom of snakes they frequently encounter. The delivery mechanism for venom is equally fascinating in its engineering. Venomous snakes have specialized teeth called fangs that are modified to deliver venom from glands located in the head. In vipers, these fangs are extremely long, sometimes measuring several centimeters in large species, and are hollow like hypodermic needles. When the mouth is closed, these fangs fold backward against the roof of the mouth, lying parallel to the jaw. When the snake strikes, muscles rotate the maxillary bones forward, swinging the fangs down and forward into striking position in a fraction of a second. The bite itself is often over in less than a second, with the snake striking forward, stabbing the fangs into the prey, contracting muscles around the venom glands to force venom through the hollow fangs, and then immediately withdrawing. This hit-and-run approach is particularly important for vipers hunting dangerous prey like rodents that might bite back if given the chance. After envenomating the prey, the viper releases it and waits at a safe distance, using its tongue and Jacobson's organ to follow the scent trail of the dying animal. The venom not only kills but also begins breaking down tissue, making it easier for the snake to track and later digest. Within minutes, the prey succumbs to the venom and the snake can approach safely to consume it without risk of injury. Once prey has been subdued through constriction, venom, or simple mechanical overpowering for small prey items, the snake faces the challenge of swallowing. This is where some of the most remarkable adaptations of snake anatomy come into play. Snakes swallow their prey whole and entire, without any chewing or tearing, which means they must be able to consume animals that may be significantly larger in diameter than their own heads. The key to this seemingly impossible feat lies in the extreme flexibility of the snake's skull and jaws. Unlike mammals, where the lower jaw is a single bone on each side fused together at the chin, snake lower jaws consist of two separate bones connected at the front by an elastic ligament. This allows the two sides of the lower jaw to move independently and spread apart, dramatically increasing the width of the mouth opening. Additionally, the lower jaw is not directly attached to the skull, but is connected through several freely moving joints that allow it to drop down and move forward and backward. The upper jaw is similarly modified for flexibility. Many of the bones that are fused solid in mammal skulls are connected by elastic tissue in snakes, allowing them to spread apart and move independently. The result is a skull that can expand in 3 dimensions, accommodating prey much wider than the snake's head at rest. As the snake works the prey into its mouth, it alternately advances each side of the lower jaw, walking the jaws over the prey in a process that looks almost like the snake is pulling itself over the meal rather than pulling the meal into itself. The teeth of snakes, numerous and sharply curved backward, play a crucial role in this process. They don't cut or tear, but instead act like tiny hooks that prevent the prey from sliding back out as the snake advances its jaws forward. With each movement of the jaw, the teeth on that side grip the prey and pull it slightly deeper into the mouth. The process is slow and methodical, sometimes taking 30 minutes or more for large meals, the snake resting periodically with the prey partially consumed, then resuming the gradual engulfment. The skin of the snake's body, and particularly the throat, is extraordinarily elastic, able to stretch to several times its resting diameter. The scales themselves are relatively rigid, but they overlap like roof tiles, and as the body expands, the stretchy skin between the scales becomes visible. You can watch the outline of the prey animal progress slowly down the snake's body as powerful waves of muscular contraction in the body wall push it toward the stomach, a process called peristalsis, similar to what moves food through our own intestines but far more powerful. Breathing during swallowing presents an obvious problem when the mouth and throat are completely blocked by prey. Snakes solve this through a remarkable adaptation. The glottis, the opening to the windpipe, can be extended forward out of the floor of the mouth like a snorkel, allowing the snake to breathe even while the mouth is stuffed with prey. This muscular tube, lined with cartilage rings to keep it open, protrudes to one side of the prey and remains extended throughout the swallowing process, ensuring continuous airflow to the lungs. Once swallowed, the prey enters the stomach where powerful digestive enzymes and acids begin breaking it down. Snake digestive systems are remarkably efficient, capable of digesting everything except fur, feathers, and the hardest parts of bone. The metabolic rate of the snake increases dramatically during digestion, sometimes by 40 times the resting rate, a phenomenon called specific dynamic action. Blood flow to the digestive tract increases massively, and the snake's body temperature rises slightly from the heat generated by cellular metabolism. The heart actually grows larger during digestion to pump the increased blood flow required, then shrinks back to normal size after digestion is complete. The time required for complete digestion varies with the size of the meal, the ambient temperature, and the species of snake, but typically ranges from several days to 2 weeks. During this time, the snake is relatively inactive and vulnerable, preferring to remain hidden in a safe location. After digestion is complete, The indigestible remains are expelled as a compact pellet, and the snake may not eat again for days, weeks, or even months depending on how large the meal was. This feast or famine lifestyle is actually the norm for many snake species, particularly the large constrictors. Studies using radio transmitters to track wild pythons have found that individuals may eat only a handful of meals per year, perhaps 6 to 10 times annually, yet maintain healthy body condition. Between meals, their metabolic rate drops to minimal levels, conserving energy and allowing them to survive extended periods without food. This metabolic flexibility is something mammals cannot achieve. We must eat regularly to maintain our high, constant body temperature and activity levels. The patience required for a snake's hunting strategy is extraordinary by mammalian standards. An ambush predator like a gaboon viper may wait motionless in the same spot for days or even weeks, expending virtually no energy, waiting for prey to pass within striking range. When that moment finally comes, the strike itself is over in a fraction of a second, representing an explosive release of the energy conserved during days of waiting. This is the ultimate expression of efficiency, expending effort only when success is nearly guaranteed, remaining inactive the rest of the time. There's something almost meditative about this approach to life, this willingness to wait without frustration or impatience for the right moment. In our fast-paced world, we often feel we must be constantly active, constantly productive. The snake reminds us that there's wisdom in stillness, in patient observation, in waiting for the right opportunity rather than frantically pursuing every possibility. The snake doesn't waste energy chasing prey it has little chance of catching. It waits, conserves, and acts decisively when conditions are optimal. Life cycles and renewal, reproduction and shedding. The reproductive biology of snakes is as varied as their feeding strategies, encompassing both egg-laying and live-bearing species, with some groups containing both types. The division between oviparous species, those that lay eggs, and viviparous species, those that give birth to live young, is not absolute or phylogenetically consistent, meaning that closely related species may use different strategies depending on their environmental conditions and evolutionary history. Egg-laying is generally considered the ancestral condition for reptiles, and many snake species retain this reproductive mode. Oviparous snakes produce eggs with leathery, parchment-like shells quite different from the hard, calcified shells of bird eggs. These eggs are permeable to water and gases, allowing the developing embryo to exchange oxygen and carbon dioxide with the environment while also absorbing moisture. The mother typically deposits her eggs in a protected location with appropriate temperature and humidity, such as under logs, in rotting vegetation that generates heat through decomposition, or in abandoned burrow systems. Most egg-laying snakes provide no parental care after laying, simply abandoning the eggs to develop on their own. However, some species, particularly pythons, are notable exceptions to this pattern. Female pythons coil around their clutch of eggs and remain with them throughout the entire incubation period, which may last 2 or 3 months. During this time, the mother doesn't eat at all, fasting completely while guarding her eggs from predators and regulating their temperature. If ambient temperatures drop too low, she can actually generate heat through rapid muscular contractions, essentially shivering to warm her eggs, raising their temperature several degrees above ambient. This represents a significant metabolic cost and demonstrates a level of parental investment unusual among reptiles. The number of eggs in a clutch varies enormously by species, from a single egg in the smallest snakes to over 100 eggs in some large pythons. Generally, larger snakes produce more eggs, but there's significant variation even within species depending on the mother's size and body condition. Well-fed females in prime condition produce larger clutches than smaller or nutritionally stressed individuals, reflecting the reality that egg production is energetically expensive and requires substantial resources. Live-bearing snakes, found in groups like vipers, boas, and sea snakes, retain the eggs inside their bodies throughout development, giving birth to fully formed young. This strategy, called viviparity or ovoviviparity depending on the degree of connection between mother and embryos, has evolved independently in snakes multiple times. It appears to be advantageous in cooler climates where external temperatures might be too low for proper egg development, or in environments where suitable nesting sites are scarce. In viviparous species, the female essentially becomes a mobile incubator, carrying her developing offspring with her as she moves through the environment seeking optimal basking sites to maintain proper temperatures for development. This allows behavioral thermoregulation to control embryo temperatures much more precisely than would be possible with eggs buried in soil or vegetation. The mother can move to warm locations when temperatures drop and retreat to shade when it's too hot, maintaining conditions within the narrow range optimal for development. The developing embryos receive nutrition from their own yolk supplies, much like embryos developing in eggs, but they remain surrounded by thin membranes rather than being enclosed in shells. In some species, there's direct transfer of nutrients from mother to embryos through specialized placenta-like structures, making the arrangement more similar to mammalian pregnancy. Birth typically occurs when the female finds a secure location, with the young emerging still enclosed in thin transparent membranes that they immediately rupture and crawl out of. Newborn snakes are fully independent from their first moment of life, immediately capable of crawling away, hiding, and even hunting appropriate prey. Mating behaviors in snakes often involve elaborate courtship rituals, particularly in species where males must compete for access to females. During breeding season, males of many species engage in combat dances, where two males intertwine their bodies and wrestle, each trying to push the other down while raising their own heads high. These battles are usually not harmful, lacking the biting and injury that might characterize aggressive encounters with prey or predators. Instead, they're ritualized contests of strength and endurance, with the loser eventually retreating and leaving the victor to court the female. Female choice also plays a role in snake mating systems. Females are often larger than males and are not easily forced to mate against their will. A female may reject multiple males before accepting one, and the cues she uses to make this decision might include male size, persistence of courtship, or chemical signals in the male's pheromones that indicate genetic quality or health. Some species form mating aggregations where dozens or hundreds of individuals gather, with males competing intensely for opportunities to mate with the females present. Perhaps the most visually dramatic aspect of snake biology, and one that occurs regularly throughout their lives, is the shedding of skin, scientifically termed ecdysis. Unlike mammals that shed skin cells continuously in microscopic flakes, snakes shed their entire outer layer of skin in one piece, like pulling off a sock, revealing fresh new skin underneath. This remarkable process occurs because the outer layer of snake skin, composed of dead keratin cells, cannot grow or stretch indefinitely. As the snake grows larger, or as the outer skin becomes damaged and worn from crawling through abrasive environments, it must be replaced entirely. The shedding process begins with changes in hormone levels that trigger the separation of the old outer layer from the new layer developing underneath. During this pre-shedding phase, which lasts about a week, the snake's colors become dull and the eyes turn opaque and milky blue as fluid accumulates between the old and new layers of the spectacle covering the eye. This temporary blindness makes the snake more defensive and prone to hiding, as it cannot see clearly to detect threats or hunt effectively. As shedding approaches, the fluid is reabsorbed and the eyes clear again, a sign that shedding is imminent, usually within a day or two. The snake begins the shedding process by rubbing its snout against rough surfaces to loosen the old skin around the lips and head. Once a small gap opens, the snake crawls forward through tight spaces between rocks or branches, catching the loose skin on these obstacles and literally crawling out of it like removing a glove. The shed skin turns inside out as the snake moves through it, revealing the perfect impression of every scale, a ghostly translucent replica of the snake that once wore it. A healthy snake sheds its skin in one complete piece, from nose to tail tip, including the lenses covering the eyes and even the lining of the mouth. The entire process, once initiated, typically takes less than half an hour. The fresh skin underneath is vibrant and clean, the colors more intense than they had been in the dull pre-shed phase, making this a time when snakes appear at their most beautiful. Young snakes, because they're growing rapidly, may shed every few weeks. Adults shed less frequently, perhaps 3 or 4 times per year, depending on growth rate, feeding frequency, and environmental conditions. The shed skin itself is quite beautiful in its own way, a perfect negative impression of the snake, transparent enough to see through yet showing every detail. Examining a shed skin, you can count the ventral scales, see the pattern of the dorsal scales, even identify the species if you know what to look for. Collectors prize shed skins, and in many cultures they're considered symbols of renewal, transformation, and healing. The snake's ability to emerge fresh and renewed from worn skin seen as a metaphor for personal growth and change. There's something deeply symbolic about this process of shedding, this periodic release of what no longer serves an emergence in a renewed state. We humans don't shed our skin all at once, but we undergo our own cycles of change and renewal, releasing old patterns and ways of being that have become limiting, emerging with fresh perspectives. The snake, patient and methodical in its approach to shedding, reminds us that transformation cannot be rushed, that there's a natural timing to growth and change that must be respected. As you continue to relax, feeling your breath moving slowly in and out, your body growing heavier and more at peace, consider the snake's cycle of growth and renewal. There's no struggle in the shedding, no resistance to the natural process. When the time comes, the snake simply allows it to happen, working with the process rather than against it, and emerges refreshed. Perhaps there are things we too could release with less struggle, old skins of thought or habit that we could simply step out of when their time has passed. Coexistence. Snakes in ecosystems and human culture. Snakes play vital ecological roles in virtually every terrestrial and many aquatic ecosystems where they occur. As predators, they help regulate populations of their prey species, which often include rodents, insects, and other animals that can reach pest proportions without natural control. A single snake over the course of a year might consume dozens or hundreds of mice, rats, or other small mammals, providing natural pest control that benefits agriculture and human health by reducing crop damage and disease transmission. In many ecosystems, snakes themselves serve as important prey for other predators, forming crucial links in food webs. Hawks, eagles, and other raptors hunt snakes regularly. Mammals like foxes, raccoons, and mongooses eat snakes when they can catch them. Even other snakes, particularly king snakes and some Asian krites, specialize in eating other snake species. This web of predator-prey relationships, with snakes both eating and being eaten, creates the complex interconnections that make ecosystems stable and resilient. Beyond their direct effects as predators and prey, snakes provide other ecosystem services. When they shed their skins, they add organic matter to the soil that decomposes and recycles nutrients. Their burrows, when they dig them or appropriate them from other animals, provide shelter for countless other species. In some ecosystems, snake population density can be high enough that their collective biomass represents a significant portion of the total animal biomass, making them not just incidental members of the community but major players. The relationship between humans and snakes stretches back to the very origins of human culture, producing some of the most complex and contradictory symbolism of any animal. In many ancient cultures, snakes were venerated as symbols of wisdom, healing, fertility, and transformation. The rod of Asclepius, the ancient Greek symbol of medicine that remains in use today, features a snake coiled around a staff, representing the healing arts. This association arose partly from the snake's ability to shed its skin and emerge renewed, seen as analogous to the recovery from illness. In Hindu tradition, snakes appear throughout mythology and religious art, with the cobra particularly revered. The god Vishnu is often depicted resting on the coils of the cosmic serpent Shisha, and Lord Shiva wears snakes as ornaments. In many villages across India, snake shrines attract devotees who leave offerings of milk and prayers for protection and blessing. This cultural reverence translates into real protection for snakes, with many species tolerated near human habitation that might be killed elsewhere. Chinese culture features the snake as one of the 12 animals of the zodiac, associated with wisdom, intuition, and strategic thinking. In Aboriginal Australian cultures, the rainbow serpent is a powerful creator deity present in many stories, associated with water, life, and the shaping of the landscape. Across cultures in Africa, the Americas, and Oceania, serpent symbolism appears repeatedly in myths, art, and spiritual practices, though the specific associations vary widely. Yet alongside this reverence exists deep fear and antagonism. The biblical story of the serpent in the Garden of Eden established snakes as symbols of temptation and evil in Judeo-Christian tradition, influencing Western attitudes for millennia. This negative symbolism, combined with the real danger posed by venomous species and the instinctive fear response that many primates show towards snake-like shapes, has led to widespread persecution of snakes throughout much of the world. Modern conservation biology has revealed that many snake species face serious threats from habitat loss, road mortality, climate change, and direct persecution by humans. Unlike birds or mammals that might be protected due to their appealing appearance or cultural significance, snakes often receive less conservation attention despite their ecological importance. Species that were once common have declined dramatically or disappeared from large portions of their former ranges. Island species with small populations are particularly vulnerable, with several snake species having gone extinct in recent decades. There are some positive developments in snake conservation. Education programs are helping reduce fear and promote coexistence. Venom research has revealed that snake venoms contain compounds with potential medical applications, providing economic incentives for conservation. Some communities have learned that protecting snakes reduces rodent damage to crops more effectively and safely than poisons. Wildlife corridors and protected areas benefit snakes along with other species. The medical importance of snake venom research cannot be overstated. Compounds derived from snake venoms have led to important drugs for treating high blood pressure, preventing blood clots, and managing pain. The drug captopril, one of the most widely prescribed medications for hypertension, was developed from a peptide found in the venom of the Brazilian pit viper. Current research is investigating venom compounds for potential use in cancer treatment, with some showing promise in laboratory studies. Each snake species has a unique venom composition, meaning that every species lost to extinction represents the potential loss of medically valuable compounds we have not yet discovered. As we've journeyed through the world of snakes tonight, we've encountered ancient evolutionary history spanning over 100 million years, sophisticated sensory systems that detect chemical signals and thermal radiation, diverse modes of locomotion that function without limbs, extraordinary size variation from thread-thin creatures to giants, and complex ecological relationships that support healthy ecosystems. We've explored how snakes feed without chewing, how they reproduce and renew themselves through shedding, and how human cultures have responded to these remarkable animals with both reverence and fear. Through all of this exploration, several themes have emerged that speak to something deeper than mere biological facts. The snake embodies patience, waiting motionless for days without frustration or anxiety, acting only when the moment is right. It demonstrates efficiency, expending minimal energy except when necessary, living comfortably with long periods of inactivity between brief moments of intense activity. It shows us adaptability, thriving in nearly every habitat on Earth through specialized modifications of a basic body plan. The snake teaches acceptance, working with its limbless form rather than fighting against it, finding not limitation but possibility in what might seem like disadvantage. It cycles through renewal, shedding what no longer serves and emerging fresh, a regular rhythm of release and growth. It exists without rush, its metabolism slowing to near hibernation between meals, its movements deliberate and controlled rather than frantic. As you lie here now, your body fully relaxed, your mind drifting into that peaceful space between waking and sleeping, you might consider what the snake's way of being could teach us. What would it mean to wait patiently for the right moment rather than forcing action prematurely? How might our lives change if we could be fully present and still when stillness is called for, then act with complete commitment when action is required? What old skins might we be ready to shed? What aspects of ourselves have we outgrown but continue wearing out of habit? The snake asks nothing of us, expects nothing, judges nothing. It simply exists, has existed for eons longer than humans have walked the earth, and will likely continue existing long after we're gone. There's something comforting in this deep time perspective, this reminder that we're part of something much larger and older than our individual concerns. The problems that seem so urgent and overwhelming in our daily lives are but moments in the vast flow of time that the snake's lineage has witnessed. Let yourself sink deeper now, your breath barely noticeable, your thoughts becoming more distant and dreamlike. The snake glides through the tall grass on a summer evening, its scales whispering against the stems, the last rays of sunlight warming its body one final time before night falls. It moves without hurry toward its den, toward rest and safety and the long, slow metabolism of digestion and growth. There is no anxiety in this movement, no worry about tomorrow, just the steady progress toward shelter and the peace of coiling into a comfortable rest. Your own body mirrors this now, finding its comfortable position, settling into stillness, preparing for the restorative processes of sleep. Just as the snake's body slows its metabolism, your own physiological rhythms are shifting into sleep mode, heart rate declining, blood pressure dropping, the busy activity of the waking brain giving way to the deeper rhythms of rest and repair. This is natural, this is healthy, this is the ancient pattern built into your biology over millions of years of mammalian evolution. The snake coiled in its den doesn't fight sleep, doesn't lie awake worrying or planning or reviewing the day. When rest comes, it comes completely, a surrender to the body's needs without resistance. This is the wisdom we can learn from the snake, this ability to fully commit to rest when rest is what's needed. There's time enough for activity when morning comes, time enough for hunting and moving and all the necessary business of living. But now is the time for rest. As the last threads of conscious thought begin to dissolve, you might hold one final image of a snake at peace, coiled loosely in its secure den, the earth warm around it, darkness complete and comforting, the slow, steady rhythm of breathing barely perceptible, the pulse of life continuing its eternal pattern of systole and diastole, contraction and relaxation, activity and rest. The snake dreams, if snakes dream, of sun-warmed rocks and the clean smell of fresh rain on desert sand, of the patient vigil rewarded and hunger satisfied, of the ancient patterns written in its DNA playing out season after season across the patient centuries. And you too can dream now, can let go of the day and all its demands, can trust in the natural processes of rest and restoration that will carry you through the night and return you refreshed to morning. The snake has shared its secrets, has shown us that there's wisdom in stillness, power in patience, and grace in accepting what we are rather than struggling to be something else. Let the last tensions drain away now. Let your thoughts become indistinct and soft. Let sleep come in its own time, without forcing, without effort, as natural and inevitable as the tide. The snake has returned to its den, you have returned to your bed, and both of you can rest now in the peace that comes from being exactly where you need to be, exactly as you are, perfectly suited to this moment of quiet repose. Sleep now, as the snake sleeps, deeply and without worry, trusting in the morning that will come, trusting in your body's wisdom, trusting in the ancient patterns of rest and renewal that have sustained life since the first creatures drew breath. Sleep peacefully, sleep deeply, knowing that you are safe, you are supported, you are exactly where you need to be. If you've enjoyed this journey into the peaceful world of snakes, please consider subscribing to Deep Science Sleep for more calming explorations of the natural world that will guide you gently into restful sleep. Like this video if it helped you relax, and let me know in the comments what other scientific topics you'd like to explore as you drift off to sleep. Thank you for spending this evening with me, and may your dreams be as peaceful as a snake coiled contentedly in its hidden den. Good night.